Seriously, look how big it is. I don't think it is a human. I think it's a Sasquatch. You can't just see something that's maybe a once-in-a-century discovery and go do your 9-to-5 job. You got to go look for fur or footprints or some kind of evidence.
In an incredible turnaround of events, a party of hunters in the isolated woods were caught up in a remarkable encounter. While tracking a massive grizzly bear, they came upon an astounding sight, a towering 12-foot Bigfoot. As they moved deeper into the forest, what had started as a regular hunt suddenly turned into an experience that blurred the lines between myth and reality.
What's the likelihood that there are big animals that have gone undetected by scientists and by trained observers? There are lots of undiscovered things, particularly in the natural world.
Join us as we investigate this incredible discovery and learn the secrets of the mysterious species. Let's dive right in. Tonight's encounter is told by Sam Longfooter, a Native American whose surname adds a sense of irony to his story, given that it revolves around an elusive creature called Bigfoot. In 2008, Sam Longfooter and his company embarked on a risky adventure to the rough wilderness of Alaska's Tongass National Forest, with the intention of hunting grizzly bears in Alaskan style. After arriving in Ketchikan, they arranged for a local guide service to meet them for the adventure ahead. The guide arrived with a robust 36-foot trawler-style ship towing a small 2-foot aluminum boat that would carry them across the remote and risky region. The plan was simple: travel via the Bam Canal, move the trawler near their hunting spot, and then take the smaller sailboat up the Unuk River, where they would camp before beginning the grizzly hunt. Sam was well aware of the risks involved in such an expedition. Hunting grizzlies in Alaska was a life-or-death challenge. Sam's approach to grizzly hunting was always cautious, and with good cause. He never went into the wilderness without at least 1 or 2 armed men by his side. He had learnt the hard way how quickly things could go wrong when his revolver stuck in the midst of a charging grizzly about 70 feet away. Without his guide's rapid responses, Sam would not have survived to tell the tale. The incident made a lasting impression, emphasizing the need of having skilled colleagues on such dangerous adventures. Sam was joined on this excursion by an experienced professional, a guide with a solid reputation for tracking down the largest grizzlies in the Tongass National Forest. The guide knew the area like the back of his hand, and his knowledge was unparalleled. The plan was simple but demanding. Every day, they would take the little aluminum boat from the main ship and travel into the hunting zone, searching the woods for their reward. As darkness fell, they would return to the safety of the main ship to eat and relax in preparation for another long day of tracking. The forest by the river was dark, damp, and shadowy. The floor was covered with thick, spongy green moss, which muffled every step.
So there's a lot here that Bigfoot hunters find fascinating. One thing is the gait, especially the big stride.
This natural soundproofing benefited both the hunters and the bears. In this peaceful wilderness, it was easy to wonder if the hunters were tracking the bear, or if the tables had already turned, with the hunters now the hunted. In such an unpredictable environment, a moment of carelessness could lead to a fatal end, making one wish they'd never stepped into these forests. On their first day in the forest, the group instantly noticed evidence of a huge grizzly bear nearby. Fresh, massive tracks imprinted the soft ground, and multiple tree scratches revealed the presence of a dominant bear in the vicinity. Their quarry was undeniably large. However, as the day progressed, the weather changed dramatically. The rain fell quickly and hard, drowning everything in its path. Sam's guide knew that heavy rain meant it was time to leave the woods. In such situations, visibility may deteriorate, making the mossy terrain even more dangerous. Continuing the hunt in those conditions might easily result in a dangerous blunder, or worse, an unexpected encounter with a stalking predator. Caution prevailed, and they retired for the day. Sound is really important while hunting bears. Every sound may spell the difference between life and death. The severe rain that day made it practically difficult to hear anything, and with such a crucial sense impaired, remaining in the woods was too dangerous as well. Unfortunately, the rain continued all night and into the next day. Given the constant downpour, they made a collective decision to remain aboard the ship until the weather improved. By the 3rd day, the rain had stopped, and they returned to the soaked woodland. The soggy ground from days of rain presented its own set of challenges. With each stride, their boots dug 3 or 4 inches into the spongy moss that covered the woodland floor. The woods, now wet and heavy with dampness, were even more gloomy than before. As they moved deeper, the massive bear tracks they had seen earlier remained evident, their outlines softened by the rain, but no less intimidating. These prints were the clear sign of a large grizzly on the move, most likely stalking across the same terrain they were traversing. The suffocating atmosphere of the forest heightened the suspense, as visibility was limited to no more than 30 feet in either direction. In this murky maze, they were all too aware that a bear could close that distance in seconds, giving little time to respond. As the crew moved deeper into the dense forest, they discovered a second set of tracks, prints that did not belong to a bear. Everyone knew what they were looking at as soon as their gaze landed on them. These tracks were massive, well exceeding the size of any animal they had ever seen. Each print stretched to over 24 inches in length and nearly 10 inches in width. The depth of the marks, with some penetrating a foot or more into the mossy ground, indicated the huge amount of whatever had passed through the area.
Aspect of the foot. Remarkably compelling evidence. My research.
A sense of anxiety filled the group. They had come prepared for the dangers of grizzly hunting, but this was a different story. This was unfamiliar territory. Despite the danger that loomed, their curiosity outweighed their caution. They moved forward, following the strange, enormous tracks deeper into the forest. To their surprise, there were more than just a few prints spread throughout the woodland floor. There were hundreds of them, all following a clear, planned path in the same direction as the group. At that point, they had a stunning realization. They were no longer on the hunt for the grizzly that had led them into the forest. The mission had shifted. They were now pursuing something even more elusive, something that beyond description. About an hour into the walk, the group discovered themselves in another situation. The trail they had been following had gone cold, at least for the time. They began to emerge from the wet confines of the forest, entering a clearing filled with high grasses and scattered tree clusters. This vast region posed a significant difficulty to their task. It was a horrible setting for anyone hoping to stalk a bear, or any other creature for that matter. The possibility of a bear charging out of the underbrush was great, and they were well aware that danger could strike from any direction without warning. With their senses heightened, the gang went quietly, their footsteps muffled by the thick grass, as if they were walking on a luxurious mattress. Just as they had relaxed into this calm, a pungent stink hit their nostrils. The foulness was terrible, piercing through the clean air like a knife. The smell was overpowering, a sickening odor that clawed at their throats and almost made them gag. As they remained frozen in place, attempting to digest the foul odor, they realized that some of the grass and brush ahead was at least 6 feet tall. This unusual growth just contributed to the worry of the situation, increasing their senses as they searched the surroundings for signs of activity. Suddenly, a gigantic figure emerged from the dense grass about 50 feet away from them. The moment they laid eyes on it, they knew exactly what they were looking at. In a short second, the entire group dove down together, hearts thumping in their chests. Although they had hidden themselves in the underbrush, their view of the Sasquatch was entirely obscured. If the creature opted to turn around and retrace its journey, it may result in a possibly deadly confrontation. The group stayed stationary, squatted low with their weapons pointed directly ahead, every muscle strained. It seemed like an eternity, 30 minutes or more, with each second stretching out as they waited in eager expectation. Suddenly, Sam summoned the courage to stand and examine the situation. He slowly rose to his feet and inspected the area, happy to find everything safe. He instantly waved to the guide, signaling for the group to silently retreat from their hiding place. They went slowly, retracing. They eventually made it to the boat and then to the safety of the ship, where they decided to call off the hunt for the day. As they settled down, they developed an idea about the Sasquatch.
Evident in the Sasquatch foot is very elegantly adapted to the habitat in which they're found in.
When they initially saw the creature, it appeared to be squatting in the brush, possibly relieving itself. It had just stood up with its back turned to them, offering an unexpected twist to their journey in the bush. The next day, however, their resolve remained unwavering. The hunters were unwilling to quit this exciting spot, especially since a large grizzly was still roaming the area. They packed their belongings, and they returned to shore and resumed their careful searching of the deep woods. However, as they proceeded farther into the jungle, they became increasingly frustrated. Despite their diligent search, no new bear tracks showed. with the exception of the gigantic prints they had discovered the previous day. The realization set in that they were still looking for the elusive bear, but the presence of the Sasquatch stayed in their imaginations like a ghost. Around an hour into the quest, the crew discovered a new set of Sasquatch tracks in the soft dirt, similar to their previous day's walk. But the presence of the Sasquatch stayed in their imaginations like a ghost, one parallel to the other and marking the earth with their size and weight. One set of footprints was substantially larger than the other, indicating the presence of two separate species. Their working theory was that the grizzly bear had left the area, maybe due to competition from these enormous creatures. It was unclear whether it chose to retreat to avoid a territorial fight or was simply startled by the Sasquatch's presence. However, one thing was certain: the bear was no longer in this area of the forest, and the prospect of facing two Sasquatch loomed over their journey. The distinction between grizzly bears and Bigfoot, Sasquatch, emphasizes the difference between a scientifically recognized species and a mythological creature. Grizzly bears, scientifically known as Ursus arctos horribilis, are members of the Ursidae family and have been extensively studied in the wild. They typically weigh between 400 and 800 pounds, stand around 3.3 feet at the shoulder when on all fours, and reach over 8 feet when upright. These bears have a strong, muscular body with a big head, a prominent shoulder hump, and enormous claws. Their behavior has been well researched. Grizzly bears are omnivorous, hunting, mating, and hibernating, and are frequently alone save during mating, or when moms are present with their children. Bigfoot is a mysterious creature without scientific classification or proof of existence.
Hunters who take Bigfoot seriously don't take every alleged Bigfoot video seriously. In fact,
it is typically pictured as a huge, hairy, humanoid entity weighing between 300 and 900 pounds and standing 7 to 10 feet tall. Bigfoot descriptions frequently emphasize lengthy limbs, a hairy body, and big feet capable of leaving footprints ranging from 15 to 24 inches long. Unlike grizzly bears, Bigfoot's behavior is primarily based on anecdotal evidence. Witnesses describe it as quiet and reclusive, typically active at night, and capable of vocalizations and gestures that indicate intelligence. Anecdotal evidence suggests that Bigfoot is also omnivorous, with sightings of it hunting on berries, fruits, and other plants. However, there is no scientific evidence to support these dietary patterns. Thus, they are completely theoretical. These two beings' habitats are also very different. Grizzly bears can be found throughout North America, especially in Alaska, Western Canada, and certain portions of the contiguous United States, where they live in forests, mountains, and tundra. Bigfoot sightings, on the other hand, are most commonly recorded in wooded places across North America, particularly in the Pacific Northwest. However, stories of similar animals occur all around the world. Furthermore, grizzly bears are culturally significant, particularly among indigenous peoples of North America, where they are frequently seen as symbols of strength, courage, and wilderness. Many tribes incorporate grizzly bears into their mythology and art, demonstrating their tremendous respect for these animals. Grizzly bears are adaptive animals that can live in a wide range of settings, including dense forests, alpine tundras, and coastal locations. Their habitats provide a great deal of food items, including berries, fish, and small mammals, which are vital for their survival, particularly during the critical months leading up to hibernation. The facts were clear, the tracks were fresh, and the sheer size of the footprints said much about the creatures that had recently been through the area. Reflecting on the previous day's experience, one hunter recalled the moment the Sasquatch stood up. As they crouched low in the grass, he remembered the sight vividly. The creature's torso, while not fully erect, towered at least 4 feet above the surrounding greenery, casting a long shadow on the ground. Sam, standing 6 feet tall, was dwarfed by the surrounding wilderness. As they made their way through the dense underbrush, they couldn't help but observe how parts of the grass towered even taller than him, located to the forest's wild and uncontrolled nature. They were taken aback when they realized that the larger Sasquatch they were chasing may have been 11 to 12 feet tall. Each footprint they inspected simply confirmed this notion, with the size of the prints becoming increasingly frightening as they pursued their goal. With a mix of dread and excitement, the group decided to follow the 2 sets of Sasquatch tracks as far as they could without putting themselves in danger, just as they did the day before. And they went at least a mile farther into the forest. It was then that they came across a big, dying tree spread across the woodland floor, its massive trunk coated in a dense blanket of moss. Upon closer study, they discovered that the trunk had been recently split apart in the center, displaying the once mighty tree's fibrous insides. It was clear that something enormous had unleashed its might on this. Both sets of prints were clearly visible, intertwined around the huge trunk of the rotting tree, indicating the Sasquatch's recent activity. It became clear that these tall monsters were probably gathering worms from the tree. Ironically, this behavior resembled survivalist training tactics, which recognize worms as a potential food source for people in critical situations. However, the hunters were unwilling to continue their search. Their primary goal was to hunt a grizzly bear, not to pursue Sasquatch rumors. They gave up on the hunt and returned to the ship. 2 days later, fate smiled upon the group when they successfully pursued and killed a huge bear several kilometers distant on the northwest side of the river. However, there was no more sign of the Sasquatch's presence, and the woodland returned to its peaceful state. The Sasquatch's size was staggering, and its presence was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Even with a gun in hand, there was a chilling realization that no amount of firepower would be enough if the thing decided to charge. In that moment, the hunters were struck by a strong sense of vulnerability. Despite their weapons, they felt exposed. The thing stood before them, a towering figure whose enormity altered their view of reality. It seemed as if they were looking at a massive, old-fashioned kite, its shape rising and falling with each breath, its keen stare stuck on them. As the shape soared, the back expanded out even broader, reaching the shoulders, which loomed like a massive primary rib cage, possibly measuring 7 feet across. This vast expanse of muscle was breathtaking, hinting at the immense strength hidden beneath. Its upper angled part represented its upper trapezius muscles, which were so big that they concealed practically the entirety of its head from view. The creature appeared to be formed entirely of power, its muscles dominating the environment and leaving little doubt about its potential to be violent. Sam thought he was only seeing about a third of its head, the sheer enormity of the muscles distorting the familiar proportions of any creature he had ever encountered. Whether this report was exaggerated or not, it produced a vivid picture of a gigantic beast capable of weighing more than 1,000 pounds. Most people would have shivers just thinking about returning to those woods after such an experience. But for those with a curious mindset, tracking a grizzly bear in Alaska's wilderness was a test of courage and expertise. It takes a unique type of bravery to confront the wilderness head-on, especially when dealing predators.
Into the kill zone. Despite the weather, Russell pressed on, chasing the mysterious bipedal figure he had captured on his thermal camera the night before. Rain or not, the creatures of the forest had to settle somewhere. Deer, elk, bears, and maybe even the thing he was after. They all hunkered down in spots where they could stay dry. In the shadows of the pines, something unsettling waited. He found a small clearing by the water, a rare dry patch amid the soaked terrain. To him, it was more than just a lucky find. If the creature he was tracking, the one that had walked across the ridgeline, was nearby, this spot could be its hideout. Rain, after all, worked both ways. It masked sounds but also made creatures, big or small, stay put.
Some branch breaking or something heavy moving through the woods anyway.
I think you're right. You can hear that.
I mean, I do get the impression, and I think Russell got it as well, that something big is moving down.
It was the perfect opportunity to close in. Then came the discovery, a collection of bones scattered across a wide area, some as far as 20 to 30 feet from what looked like the original site. This wasn't just a random carcass left behind by predators. The bones were clean, almost unnervingly so. Unlike the gnawed remains you'd expect from a bear or wolves, these showed no bite marks. It was as if something had meticulously stripped the flesh away, leaving behind a macabre scene of white, sun-bleached fragments. He examined them closely, noting that some still had bits of tendon and flesh attached. These weren't old. Something had been here recently, and it wasn't just scavenging. He called it a kill zone, a place where something or someone brought its prey to feed. There were old bones mixed with fresh ones, painting a grim picture of repeated visits. Whatever was using this spot wasn't just passing through. It was deliberate, organized even. and that made the situation all the more unsettling. Russell moved deeper into the forest, the rain easing up slightly, but the air still heavy with moisture. He stumbled upon what looked like an old homestead, a relic from the early 20th century. The building was surprisingly intact, its roof still holding strong despite years of exposure. These kinds of places were common in remote areas, often repurposed by wildlife seeking shelter from the elements. But this one felt different. Inside, the air was stale, and the dim light revealed something horrifying. Blood, fresh enough to be bright red in places, smudged and smeared across the floor and walls. Above, rusted nails jutted out from the ceiling, sharp enough to cut.
While I'm playing, so I go to a spot where, just using my ears, I don't hear anything that I think we're interested in, and I press learn and play it.
Russell speculated that whatever had bled here had snagged itself on those nails before bolting out, leaving a trail behind. This wasn't a place to rest or recover. It was a place to flee from. Following the trail, he found more spots of blood, some partially buried under dirt but unmistakably fresh. This wasn't just an ordinary animal wound. The amount of blood suggested something serious. Russell collected samples, knowing that whatever DNA these held could be the key to identifying what he was chasing. It could be a known animal, a human, or, if he was lucky, something entirely new. Either way, it was evidence, and evidence meant progress. 10 miles from Bryce and 4 miles from the original thermal sighting, Russell pushed on. The trail led him into dense forest, where the ground softened underfoot and the air grew colder. Then he spotted it, massive footprints embedded in the mud. Each one was larger than any he'd seen before, far too big for a human, and lacking the distinctive pads and claw marks of a bear. These tracks were something else entirely. He measured their length and width with his hands, marveling at their size. The impressions were fresh, the edges still crisp from the recent rain. There were toes, clear as day, pressed deep into the soil. Russell's mind raced with possibilities. Could this be the creature he'd been tracking? The one from the ridgeline? It was hard to ignore the evidence literally laid out at his feet. Night fell, and Russell switched to stealth mode, ditching his larger gear for night vision goggles and lighter equipment. The forest came alive with eerie sounds, the rustle of leaves, the distant calls of nocturnal animals, and the occasional splash of water from unseen sources.
Unfortunately, with all that background noise from the storm, it's hard to discern what those noises are. So I've asked my friend Owen to help clean up this audio file. He's an audio recording engineer for over 20 years.
Every noise set his nerves on edge, but he moved carefully, determined not to scare off whatever was out there. As he crept closer to a stream, the sound of something large moving through the water reached his ears. He stopped, heart pounding, scanning the area with his night vision. The darkness seemed to press in around him, but he didn't dare use a light. Whatever was out there, it wasn't going to make itself easy to find. The trail eventually led him back to the footprints, this time in a clearing illuminated by the moon. They were even more pronounced here, each step spaced as if the creature had been walking at a steady pace. Russell examined the area, looking for any other signs, broken branches, fur, anything that could offer more clues. The footprints were the highlight, though, and their sheer size kept him fixated. By dawn, exhaustion was setting in, but Russell refused to quit. He followed the tracks further, deeper into the forest, where the trees grew thicker and the air felt heavier. Every step brought him closer to an answer, though what that answer might be, he couldn't yet say. The evidence was mounting, the bones, the blood, the footprints. Each piece painted a picture of something extraordinary, something that didn't belong in the ordinary world. As he paused to catch his breath, he looked around the dense forest and realized just how alone he was. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves. Whatever he was chasing, it was out there, watching, waiting, and Russell knew he was getting close. The forest seemed to wait, holding its breath. When the forest watches back, out in the wild, everything changes when you switch on a thermal camera. It's like unlocking a cheat code for spotting life in the dark. That heat trace? Pure gold. You can spot anything warm-blooded like it's a glowing beacon. Scanning this massive stretch of wilderness, the thermal made it clear there were a couple of elk grazing on a yellow patch up the hillside. Big animals, just doing their thing. Now, those elk were nothing out of the ordinary, but the night had this strange edge to it. Hours rolled by, and the thermal picked up nothing new in the ravine. It was all quiet until it wasn't. Then, a sudden movement. Something massive came into view, lurking above the elk. It wasn't a bear. This thing moved differently, like a hunter. The elk caught sight of it too, but just as quickly as it showed up, it disappeared. Maybe it realized the surprise factor was gone and bailed into the shadows, climbing up toward the ridge. That's when the thought hit. This was no ordinary predator.
As I was walking along this path, something just jumped out what appeared to be a deep impression. I've never found a footprint before. This is a first. I don't see another one.
Things got real when Bryce sent over an audio file of a supposed Bigfoot howl recorded in the same region. A sound like that could either bring the creature out or confirm everyone's worst suspicions. Last year, a similar sound lured something unidentified close enough to send chills down the spine. This time, with upgraded gear, including a parabolic mic to pick up even the faintest noises, Russell was ready to replicate the experiment. Maria and Ronnie took their positions in the hollow below, while Russell set up his high-powered speaker on the ridge. The plan was straightforward but risky. Blast the eerie howl and see what answers. The thing is, no one could be sure what the sound would mean to any creature out there. Was it a greeting, a challenge, a threat? The uncertainty added to the tension. The first howl played, echoing through the hills. Almost immediately, the coyotes started up, their calls blending into the night. It was nature's way of saying, "We hear you," but it wasn't the response they were looking for. Another round of the howl blasted, and then came something different, a sound so clear and strange that everyone froze. This wasn't a coyote or any animal they recognized. It was longer, more deliberate, and unmistakably unusual. Russell didn't play another sound, but the strange calls continued, coming from multiple directions. Whatever it wasn't just one creature. The group quickly realized they were surrounded. The calls grew louder and closer, accompanied by snapping branches and the unmistakable thuds of something heavy moving through the brush. Rocks seemed to fall, or were they being thrown? The forest came alive with a sense of being watched, tracked even. Panic started to set in when they counted not 2, but 3 sources of movement. The team was pinned, creatures closing in from all sides. The strategy seemed calculated, like these things knew how to box them in. Every sound, a crack, a thud, a whistle, felt deliberate, as if to signal their position. The team's instincts screamed danger. These weren't animals acting on random curiosity. They were methodical, strategic. One thing became clear. Whatever made those noises wasn't afraid. It wasn't backing down. The night went from eerie to terrifying as the realization hit. They weren't just observing, they were being observed. And these creatures, whatever they were, had no intention of letting them leave unnoticed. The forest seemed to close in, the darkness alive with unseen threats. The team braced themselves for what felt like an inevitable encounter, adrenaline pumping and every nerve on edge. It was one thing to theorize about what might be out there, but it was another to feel its presence, hear its calls, and know this wasn't a game. This was real. Every sense was on high alert as the creatures made their presence more known. The movement in the brush wasn't random. It followed a pattern, almost like herding. Rocks rolled or flew through the air, landing too close for comfort. The calls echoed from both sides now, surrounding the hollow where Maria and Ronnie waited. Their flashlight beams cut through the dark, but the shadows seemed to move faster than the light could follow. He held steady at his post, his parabolic mic capturing every sound. He muttered to himself about the clarity of the recordings, but there was no time to analyze. Whatever was out there had begun to close in. Maria whispered through the comms that she spotted a dark shape moving between the trees, but it vanished before she could get a better look.
Jumped out at you as being different or strange.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sending that to me. And what I want to share with you is first with these small...
Ronnie confirmed another sighting on the opposite side. Both agreed it wasn't just one figure. There were at least 3, possibly more. As the minutes stretched on, the atmosphere grew heavier. The sounds became bolder, the movements less cautious. It felt as if these creatures were testing the team, gauging their reactions, probing their defenses. Maria's voice trembled slightly as she reported a low growl from somewhere nearby. Ronnie clutched his flashlight tightly, scanning the area with quick, jerky motions. They weren't just nervous, they were terrified. He played the howl again, this time cranking up the volume to its maximum setting. The sound blasted across the forest, an otherworldly cry that seemed to shake the very ground. For a brief moment, the forest went silent. No calls, no movements, just an eerie stillness that felt more ominous than any noise. Then a deep, guttural roar erupted from the ridge. It wasn't like anything they'd heard before, a mix of anger and warning so loud it seemed to reverberate through their chests. Maria and Ronnie froze, their breath caught in their throats. Russell's hands hovered over the controls, unsure whether to play the sound again or stay silent. The roar was followed by a series of sharp, rhythmic knocks on wood, as if something was pounding on a tree. This was no random response, it was communication. The creatures were speaking in their own way, and it wasn't friendly. The team's instincts screamed at them to leave, but the scientist in Russell hesitated.
Because, I've been out in the field and I really haven't had time to assess some of these findings. So Russell really has been working out of this northeastern quadrant.
This was the closest they'd ever come to definitive evidence. Every sound, every movement was recorded, and he knew this could be groundbreaking. But the risk was growing by the second. The creatures were closing in, their movements more deliberate, their calls more aggressive. Maria's voice came through the comms, sharp and urgent. "We have to go, now." Russell finally relented, packing up the equipment as quickly as he could. Mariah and Ronnie made their way back to the ridge, their flashlights darting through the trees. The creatures didn't chase them, but their presence was felt every step of the way. The team reached their vehicle, breathless and shaken. They didn't need to say it aloud. They all knew what had happened out there was real, and it was far from over. Back at base, they reviewed the recordings. The sounds were unlike anything ever documented, a chilling reminder of what's still unknown in the wild. The terrain demanded a closer look, daring him to go further. Clues carved into the mountain. Down in the rugged wilds of the northeast target area, Russell was on the move, scrambling through steep rock slides that seemed designed to trip him up. This wasn't a stroll through a park. This was rough terrain that tested every step. He was hunting for clues, sounds, tracks, or anything that might explain the eerie vocalizations he had heard the night before. Whatever had been there, it had no trouble navigating the rocky maze. Russell, however, wasn't as graceful. With the sharp incline threatening every step, he thought it might have been easier to rappel down instead of wrestling gravity head-on. But whatever passed through last night didn't need ropes. It had moved smoothly, almost effortlessly, through the area. The noises, though unsettling, had stopped abruptly, making him wonder if the creature had taken refuge behind some massive boulder or ducked into a hidden cave where sound wouldn't carry.
Tiny little spots here where it's jagged and edgy. If it's close to me, anything with hair is gonna catch on that.
He spotted an opening nearby and crouched to investigate. The space stretched back about 30 feet, dark and mysterious. But what grabbed his attention wasn't just the depth, it was the surface inmod. Polished smooth, the rock looked like it had been worn down by constant use. The surrounding edges were jagged and rough, but this section gleamed like marble. To him, this was a sure sign of heavy traffic. Animals, perhaps mountain lions or bears, making their way up and down over the years. The space had likely seen countless creatures seeking shelter from storms or predators. He imagined that last night's storm would have made this a prime spot to hunker down. Curiosity tugged at him, so he ventured in, despite the claustrophobic squeeze. Confined spaces had never been his favorite, but he couldn't shake the thought that this narrow corridor might hold answers. As he crawled deeper, he scanned for any signs, hair, scratches, anything to prove what kind of creature had been here. The walls were tight, and the air grew stale. Every inch he moved forward, he questioned if he'd have room to turn back should things take a dangerous turn. The passage eventually dead-ended, leaving him empty-handed. Still, it was a fascinating spot, one that could easily hide something or someone. As Russell backed out, the thought lingered that more hideouts like this one were probably scattered across the hillside.
This gets a lot of use. It's just smooth from continuous use. If you look at all these other edges, they're jagged. Like, listen to this. It's just rough. This?
It was enough to push him to keep searching. Meanwhile, a few miles southwest, Mariah and Toby were setting up shop in a dense forest. They were staking out a spot where Bryce had reported strange howls echoing through the trees. Toby pointed out a tree near a natural draw in the land. The acoustics of the area would amplify any noises, making it an ideal place to catch something unusual. With recorders in place and batteries fully charged, they hoped to capture sounds that might shed light on the mysterious vocalizations. Mariah decided to scan the forest with thermal imaging, while Toby monitored the recordings. The setup was perfect, dry, strategic, and brimming with potential. They settled in, ready for a long night of observation. Back at the cliffside, Russell stumbled upon another opening, this one more intriguing than the last. The cave seemed to stretch on endlessly, the kind of place that could easily hide a creature, or worse. The ground was littered with disturbed leaves and dirt, clear signs of movement. Something had been here, and recently. The memory of the strange grunt from the previous night came rushing back. It hadn't sounded like any animal he had ever heard. The noise had an almost deliberate, menacing quality to it. The deeper he went, the tighter the cave became. The walls closed in, forcing him onto his hands and knees.
I need to check each and every tunnel if possible.
He scanned every surface, hoping to find evidence. A tuft of hair, claw marks, anything. But the place was eerily clean, save for the occasional smoothed-down rock, hinting at regular traffic. It was unsettling. The absence of debris or traces seemed almost unnatural. Pushing on, he found himself questioning his choices. The deeper he crawled, the more dangerous it became. If something was hiding in the shadows, he'd have no way to escape. Yet, he pressed forward, determined to see where the cave led. At one point, he spotted a faint glimmer of light ahead. Relief washed over him as he realized the passage opened up on the other side of the mountain. This wasn't just a cave, it was a secret corridor cutting straight through the rock. The discovery was exhilarating. Such a hidden path could easily serve as a covert route for animals, or even something more elusive. He imagined smaller creatures or young ones using the passage to move unseen from one side of the mountain to the other. This was a find worth watching. When night fell, Russell planned to position himself near the opening, using thermal imaging to catch anything that might emerge. Meanwhile, Mariah and Toby's setup was already proving fruitful. The forest was alive with faint rustlings and distant calls. The analog and digital recorders worked in tandem, ready to capture every detail. Toby occasionally glanced at the thermal screen, but so far, nothing out of the ordinary had appeared.
Is your mic picking that up? I can hear it. That sounds like something walking through water.
Still, the anticipation kept them alert. The forest had a way of making you feel watched, even when nothing seemed to be there. As Russell emerged from the cave, the enormity of the landscape struck him. The hillside was riddled with potential hideouts, each one a possible piece of the puzzle. The polished rocks, the strange sounds, the eerie emptiness of the caves, it all hinted at something just out of reach. He knew the night ahead would be crucial. With thermal imaging in hand and the determination to uncover the truth, he was ready to face whatever mysteries the mountain had to offer. The rugged terrain continued to pull Russell deeper into its grasp. Every slope and shadow seemed to whisper of untold stories, as if the land itself was alive with secrets waiting to be uncovered. His mind raced with the possibilities of what might have left such a distinctive mark on the environment. Perhaps creatures long thought to be myths, or merely evidence of nature's relentless evolution. Either way, he felt like an explorer venturing into uncharted territory. The night promised to be a pivotal moment, one that could redefine everything he thought he knew about the wild places of the Northeast. As Russell ventured into the unknown, the mountain seemed alive, holding its breath. Are these whispers nature's power, or something otherworldly? Like, comment, and subscribe for more mysteries.